Yeah, good morning. This is Rabbi Shlomo Furst, temporarily substituting for Rabbi Levitt. And we're learning Hagadah of Pesach, just a few weeks before Pesach. So please join us. After that, we'll be continuing on through the first 2 weeks before Pesach. So continue to watch us if you're watching, and if you like, join us. If you like to join us. Yeah, where should we pick up? Baruch Shomer Avtachas Yisrael, Baruch.
I think that's our next.
Okay, very good. Go ahead, Ray. You'd like to read that? We'll start and discuss this as hopefully as thoroughly as we can.
Okay. Baruch Shomer Avtachas Yisrael. Blessed is he who observed his promise unto Israel. I'll ask what that means, what the Shema means and what the word observe means. But I'll continue to.
Well, it says Shomer. Shomer can mean to be guard. Actually, I would say in English, even though it's not in again, whenever you're translating, you have two things. Basically two things you have to be concerned with. One, and which is they're both primary. You have to attempt to translate as accurately as possible, right? Nevertheless, you have to translate in a way that the one who's reading it will understand what you mean. Because, look, if you're not going to translate accurately, you failed, because that's not what the original meaning was.
Mm-hmm.
But you also can fail if you translate accurately, but there's no meaning to what you've translated. So you have to keep your obligation to the actual text, and you have to keep your obligation to the one who's going to be reading your translation, right? So I would say, even though it says Baruch Shomer Avtachas Yisrael Baruch Hu, I would say in English you would say blessed is he who kept his promise to the Jews.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Shomer is, you mean when you shomer something, when you watch something, when you guard something, that means you're basically keeping it as it was. You're not letting it fall to damage or decay or theft or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
So here a person we say in English, the person keeps his promise. So in Lashon HaKodesh, you see shomer havtacha, so he's guarding his promise, or they say he's observing his promise. But the observing his promise doesn't really ring exactly true in terms, maybe for Australians perhaps, I don't know, but nothing personal. But I don't know Australians so well, so. But so, I mean, look, obviously, for the one who translated this, so he did what's called a literal translation. Shomer really means to observe. A person, when you say a person is shomer mitzvahs, doesn't mean he's shomer mitzvahs. You can say he observes mitzvahs. You can also say he keeps mitzvahs.
Yeah.
Right? They're both in terms of the English understandable, right?
Right.
And whether one's more accurate than the next can be left as a question. Shomer does it mean observing? Does it mean keeping? I mean, it could mean both.
Funnily enough, the word observed in English can have two meanings. One, I observe, it means I see, I look at,
Right.
I examine with my eyes,
Right.
and observe means to keep.
Yes.
Also, I kept the whatever I keep.
So you say you observe the Sabbath, it means you keep the Sabbath. You
Yes.
observe the Sabbath.
Yeah. But I can't say, or I can say, I observed the birds building a nest.
Right, because you're not shomer the birds building the nest.
I'm a bird observer.
Yeah.
That's what they're called.
Bird watcher.
You can even say in English, you can say I'm observant.
Yeah.
You observe.
No, I'm a
Same thing as
keeper.
saying I'm orthodox.
Yeah. So the word has two meanings, completely different meanings. Anyway, okay.
Right, and so so I'll tell you that first of all, what was the haftacha, right? So they explain the Ramban here. They explain the Shavtiach Avraham Avinu the Golan mi Shiyardim Mitzrayim. HaKodesh Baruch Hu promised to Avram Avinu that his offspring, Avram Avinu's offspring, when they would go down to Mitzrayim, they would eventually be redeemed. So this is a praise to HaKodesh Baruch Hu that he kept his promise, right? Keeping his promise, that's something which we, right? We said, here the Rashbat says, Baruch Shomer Shavtacha So Yisrael Baruch Hu Chayavim Anu, we're obligated, right? Levorach L'Elokeinu, to give a blessing, so to speak, to our God. Shu Mavtiach, also he promises and he also follows through. He also keeps it. He not just doesn't promise, he also keeps his promise. Ki Yotzi Abraham Mibeis Aviv V'Holich L'Eretz Canaan, right? He said, right, when he gave, we learned this before earlier today, about Lech Lecha, Hashem promised Avraham Avinu when he would leave Eretz Canaan, he would say, Esech HaGoy Gadol, he would make from Avraham Avinu a great nation, right? Va'achar Goyzer Aleinu Avdos, and later on there would be a decree upon the offspring of Avraham Avinu that they would have to be enslaved, and they have to undergo suffering. V'zen Nesoyin Gadol. And this was a great test for Avraham Avinu, that he realized that his children would be enslaved and would have to suffer. That was a tremendous thing for him to hear. And nevertheless, even though Hashem said to Avraham Avinu, his children, his offspring, are going to go to Golus, go to exile, and be enslaved and suffer, nevertheless he also promised that he would, in fact, redeem them and take them out, which he actually did.
So the promise here is the redemption.
Yeah, that's right.
So, will we continue?
I think so. One second. Baruch Hu. Baruch Hu.
I haven't said that.
Okay, go ahead.
Baruch Hu, HaKodesh, Baruch Hu, Chashev, Es HaKetz, La'asas, Kama, Shema, L'Avraham, Avinu, Ivris, Bein, HaKodesh, Habis
Ivris ben Abisari.
Oh, sorry, no. I thought it was a shrub of
Ivris Abisari.
Right.
That was the full explanation of the HaKodesh Baruch Hu's intention to have the offspring of Avraham Avinu enslaved and eventually be redeemed.
By the end of our bondage, we might perform that which he had promised our father Abraham in the covenant of the pieces. As it is said, Yomer L'Avram, Yodai, today, Ki Ger, Yeh, Zaracha, the Eretz Lahem. He said, Abraham, know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that isn't theirs. But Abraham, but you know, our son, Abba, Maas, Shana, and they shall make them serve and shall afflict them 400 years. Vagam also es Hagoy Asher Yavado Dan Anochi, and also that nation whom they shall serve I will judge. Acharei, and afterwards Cain, Betsaul, Birachush, Godol. And afterwards I shall come forth with great substance.
Right, I mean, after the end of the servitude, after the 400 years, right, and after the judging of the nation, meaning the Egyptians, which enslaved us, that was basically the 10 plagues. After all these things, they will come out with a rechushka, with great wealth, great an amassment of wealth. So here, there's one of the commentaries here explains in a very unique way. He brings down the Shibuli Haleket, actually the brother of the Shibuli Haleket, says as follows. Baruch Shomesh Avtakal Yisrael Baruch Hu, Shekadosh Baruch Hu Hishav Esa Kates, Sos Kamash Nemar, says as he said Avram Avinu. So Kadosh Baruch Hu Hishav Esa Kates, he made an accounting, a reckoning of the end, the Kates, Sos to do Ma Hashem or Lavravinu, to do what was said to Avram in the brisbane of Asar. Perish Ach, this is Shibuli Haleket writing here. Perish Ach Binyamin Nu Shazeh Omar Kadosh Baruch Hu Kishiv Esa Kates. That the Kadosh Baruch Hu said to Avraham Avinu that he's going to Kishiv Esa Kates, right? Lo Koyal Yitzias Mitzrayim. That's not going on the Yitziyah from Mitzrayim. Ela Geula Achrona Koy. It's going on the end, the last eventual Golus that we happen to be in, right? And most of the explanations are Hishav Esakates, those 400 years from the time of the Grace Ben assignment to the time of coming out of Mitzrayim, right? But there's another explanation that we see here that's really turning the whole amount of time that needs to be accrued for us to come out of Mitzrayim. That was only part of what Hashem was promising to Avinu. Hashem was promising, according to this explanation, Hashem was promising Avinu that all the times we will be enslaved, and all the times, even to this last time when we're in the final gullus, the final exile, that is Hashem is Kishiv Esakes. The Kadosh Baruch Hu is keeping in mind the time that this gullus will come to an end.
Does that mean that in toto we would have been enslaved over our history for 400 years?
It was like this. Where do we get this 400 years? Okay, the 400 years is a question, and they're basically two ways of looking at it, as Chazal prescribed. One is it is 400 years from the time of the birth of Yitzchak Avinu to the time of our coming out of Mitzrayim. Because if you look at the actual time we're in Mitzrayim, it amounts to 210 years, right? So in order to fulfill another 190 years, you have to go back to the time of the birth of Yitzchak. And therefore, one derech, one way of approach, is that the Golus began with Yitzchak's birth. Okay, 400 years before we came out of Mitzrayim. But we only went down to Mitzrayim only after 190 years after Yitzchak's birth, and we only remained in Mitzrayim for 210 years. Okay, that's the way of understanding that that Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim when the time came, the 400 years time came up. There's another way of understanding things as follows: that really, the time only began from the time we went down with Yaakov Avinu, and from the time that Yaakov Avinu went down to Mitzrayim to the time he came was only, as we said, 210 years. So you have another 190 years which is unaccounted for. And first of all, the question you have to ask and answer is, why did we come out before the time? If Hashem said there's going to be a time of 400 years, why did we come out before the time, only after 210 years worth? The answer to that is given that shibud, the servitude, the suffering that we encountered was so intense, right, that Hashem had to take us out early. Because we had fallen already to the 49th level of Tuma, of impurement. And had we remained there one more moment, we would have been lost forever in Mitzrayim. We would have sunk so far.
Why is that a measure of suffering? That's a measure of how far we sunk.
Right. Well, we sunk because of the suffering, meaning we were involved with a lot of things we shouldn't have been involved with because we were primarily, let's say, idol worship. We were involved with idol worship because we were enticed into idol worship because of the fact that we were promised if we in fact worship idols, they, the Egyptian taskmasters, would make our work easier and lighter. They basically join us and we'll make your jobs easier.
And they didn't do it.
Well, they did. They did. Those people, they obviously enticed them enough, and they can, to a certain extent, from what I understand, they did keep their promise. Those who did worship idols did get breaks. They got days off, less hours, whatever it might have been.
But they were already gone at that point. They already were at that level of.
So that's what brought us to the level. That's what brought us to the threshold of spiritual demise. Right? Right? Had we gone past that threshold of spiritual demise, we would have gone to the 50th level of Tuma, and the base Levitt basically explains this based on Chazal. We would have gone to the 50th level of defilement, of spiritual impurity, and we would have lost our association to Avram Avinu, right? And since the promise, the Haftacha that Hashem made to Avram Avinu, that he was going to redeem his Zerecha, right? That's what it says. You look there, right? Like Shenemar, v'yomer la'Avram, Yodea teidaki ger ye Zerecha be'eretz lo lehem, right? Ba'avdum, and they'll be enslaved, right? V'inyosom, they'll be suffered, they'll be oppressed. Arba b'mei shonos, right? V'gam as goy asher yavdu dananopi v'akadei yesu v'kushtor. Zerecha, right? Ger ye zerecha. Your zera, your offspring will be in an eretz which is not them, and they'll have to suffer, and Hashem's going to take them out. But that's only, right, if they have an association to you. If they've
that
gone.
Includes converts. That includes converts.
Yeah, to a certain extent. Once a person becomes a convert, he joins the Jewish people, so he's considered to be Jewish.
He's considered to be Zerecha.
Oh, so that's a separate question. That's a separate question. The person can speak about that. For example, if he wasn't at Har Sinai, I can consider to say Mitzivanu. Right? That's also a question he owns. There are different aspects of what a convert's ability to say certain things, because in fact he's not considered to be the offspring or at least in the physical sense, in the genetic sense. Spiritually, perhaps he could be considered. So there's discussion. That's a separate share. There's discussion about that. But going back to the base of Levi's explanation here, had Klal Yisrael in Mitzrayim slipped into that 50th level of Tumah, gone through the threshold of spiritual demise, right? They would have lost their spiritual genetic connection to Avram Avinu, and then the promise, that was Pharaoh's and the Egyptians' whole point here, because one of the basic questions the base Levi asks others, after the first plague, after the plague of blood, Dam, the Egyptian economy was ruined. Had it just been that they didn't want the Jews to go free because they would lose their enslaved employment, right? And that would be bad for the economy. Well, the economy's wrecked and destroyed for perhaps decades anyway right now, right? Right. After the 7 days of blood, everything's been so messed up. Economically speaking, get them out of here, even if we have another plague, this doesn't pay. Right? So Powell's economic advisors, right, would clearly be advising him to let these people go. Right? So why do they keep them? in spite of the fact economically they've now been made bankrupt, because that wasn't their point. They weren't interested in keeping slaves, right? They enslaved other people in Mitzrayim. They had, maybe Ethiopians, Moroccans. You could have enslaved other people who wanted slaves.
Right.
Even the Jews weren't the best slaves in the world. Maybe we were, but you don't need, if you want slaves, enslave other people. You don't need Jews to be specifically slaves for you.
Right.
They wanted to destroy, as a sholem, this link between the Jewish people and Avraham Avinu. They wanted to, because again, the Jewish people, represent Kedusha, holiness, spiritualism, morals, and fulfilling the will of the Ribono Sholem in this world, and they weren't interested in that. So they constantly, right, are at odds with the fact that the Jews exist, and we are serving Hashem, and they are serving their own bellies and the rest of the parts of the bodies that like to have certain pleasures, right? So they want to eliminate that. Right? What do you call it, the Jewish conscience, whatever you want to, in every society or whatever philosophy you want to call it, that's what they're interested in doing, because it's the juxtaposition between the physical and the spiritual. So really, what we understand and what's right is to reach a balance, so you can live spiritually, and you have spiritual aspirations which you want to accomplish, and you have physical needs, so you reach a balance between the two, so you can have success in this world. But if you're simply interested in physical needs and without spiritual aspirations, so you're no better than a cow, right? And if you're, on the other hand, if you're only spiritually aspiring without any physical fulfillment of any physical needs, so you wind up in the base course, or wind up in the cemetery after a few days. Stop eating, drinking, sleeping, all those kind of things. So either those two options aren't viable, right? So the Jewish option, that you have spiritual aspirations and you have physical needs, and with Torah you're taught how to make a balance between the two, and you make a successful life in this world, right? So Paro's whole point was to snap the spiritual connection between the Jewish people who were living in his land at the time and their forefather Avraham Avinu, in which case the promise couldn't be kept. Yeah.
So we have then the connection between Hagim, Hanukkah, Purim, and Pesach.
All right. Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, just that civilizations and peoples trying to destroy us one way or another, either physically or spiritually or both.
Sure.
That's a running theme.
Yeah, it's a repeated theme. That's classic. It's classic. And, up until our very time. I mean, even though it might be the goals that we're in right now is in certain ways is very passive. So, you can learn Torah, go to Yeshivas, but at the same time, it's not. But it's still in a certain diabolical way. It's still trying to accomplish the same thing. It always has to be that way. It always has to be this conflict. That's why at the very end, when Mashiach finally comes, the non-Jews are going to uprise and rebel against him, because it's going to be very representative of this pure positive balance between spiritual aspirations and physical needs, right? So that was the right. So therefore, we were about to slip into the 50th level of spiritual impurity, and therefore we would not be our lineage, our spiritual lineage, Avraham would be broken. And then Hashem would not be, so to speak, Paro was hoping that Hashem would therefore not keep his promise to the Jewish people, and we would be enslaved forever and ever and ever. As we said at the very beginning of the Hagadah, Ad Hayom, if Hashem didn't take us out of Mitzrayim, we'd still be slaves to Paro and Mitzrayim. That was his goal.
Without digressing too much, if at all,
sure.
These 50 levels, are they enumerated somewhere in Zohar or in somewhere else?
Probably, I'm not sure. I've never seen them, but I imagine there's probably somewhere. You should know when we the second night of Passover, you have first night which is Leil Pesach, then you have the second night, then we start counting the Omer, right?
Yeah.
You should know there are 50 days from the,
Oh, that's
right?
right, yeah.
50 days, and you should know it's the phrase Yetzias Mitzrayim is mentioned 50 times in the Torah.
Yeah, that's right. It's silly of it, because we've got this book, Counting the Omer, about counting the Omer. I've forgotten what it's called. And it's got day 1, 2, 3, and it's got in it a...
It's the Ferris.
Yes, yes.
We begin the night, the first night we start counting is Chesed Sheba Chesed,
That's right.
and the last one that we count is Malchus Sheba Malchus.
That's
Now,
right.
as I always say, I don't know too much about everything in between. It's Ferris and all, but just the words mean, just take the word that Chesed Sheba Chesed, by taking us out of Mitzrayim, that was the pinnacle, the ultimate of Chesed, right? And that goal was that we should reach the ultimate of servitude of Malchus Sheba Malchus, right? So everything in between, there's what to understand and discuss. But that spectrum of Chesed Sheba Chesed to Malchus Sheba Malchus, those obviously there's some, and as they say, each one of those times that the Torah mentions the Yetzias Mitzrayim, it represents another shar of kedusha, another gate of holiness, which we're elevating ourselves up and out of the gate, the level, dimension of impurity. So there obviously there must be a way, people that discuss in detail these levels. So therefore,
It's also the 48 ways.
yeah, that's right. That also corresponds very clearly to the 49 ways of and the 49 days of the Omer. That corresponds exactly, very clearly, no doubt about it. So therefore, HaKodesh Baruch Hu saw, according to this understanding, that there remained 190 years left, and it was impossible that we remain another second in Mitzrayim. So Hashem cut short the time of 400 years, and took us out after 210 years, 190 years early. So what about the 190 years? Hashem made a promise, right? Hashem's keeping His promise, right? Hashem made a promise 400 years, He keeps His promise. So if it's a promise, it's a promise. So what are we going to do with these 190 years? So,
Started the account early.
we left early, so there's still 190 years to be paid back, somehow, somewhere. So what happened was, when Moshe Rabbeinu delayed and came back from the bringing down the Luchos, and Klal Yisrael made the Egel, so we failed our test of the Avodah Zorah. We were given a test at the time of the Egel that, because at the Yam Suf, when we were going through the Yam Suf, there was a complaint against the Jews. The complaint was as follows: the Egyptians were going to die by drowning in the sea, and the Jews were supposed to pass through on the dry land in the midst of the sea. A complaint was made: hey, look, the Egyptians observe Avodah Zorah, and the Jews were also observing Avodah Zorah. That's why they were taken out early. They were at the very last level before the threshold of spiritual doom, right? So the HaKodesh Baruch Hu said, okay, let's give them a test. There'll be a test after they accept the Torah. We'll give them a test. Moshe Rabbeinu will be delayed, and we'll see if they're going to observe Avodah Zorah. Because we can say they observed the Zorah because of the suffering, not because they wanted to. They just wanted to get out from under the suffering. They were what we call ba'oinus, right? So, but then we were given a test, so let's see if they'll do it baratzon. So, okay, at Har Sinai we failed the test, and we did it baratzon. Therefore, we have to, had we passed the test at the Chet Egel, Hashem would have been mevatel on the 190 years, and said, I'll take care of that, It's my bank, I'll do what I want with my accounts in my bank, right? But since we failed the test, so now that 190 years has to be paid back. So that's why we're still, after even more than almost 2,000 years, we're still in all the Hanukkah, Purim, right? Yavam, Edom, right? Paras, all these exiles we've been through are payment of these 190 years, which had to be paid back. So therefore, those who explain the 400 years is not going on the original time limits, right? Some say it's even going now, right, when we're fulfilling the time that had to be paid back for those original 400 years. Okay, well, let's stop. Continue, Mr. Shem, tomorrow.